Welcome, everyone. Uh, I'm always happy to be here on this weekly webinar, and I'm gonna just give people a couple of minutes to join. I see the names of the participants are, uh, everyone is joining. Thank you for that. I see many familiar names as well as new names. So thank you again. And it's always great to see that many of you come every week and always send us great questions also outside of the webinar. So thank you for that. And welcome to all the new people that are joining today for the first time. And today, again, we will provide an update on the HEALEY ALS Platform Trial. Next slide. As you know, we are testing 4 investigational products at this time. This is a perpetual adaptive trial, and we intend to keep it open long term to continue to test more interventions as they become available. Because we use a shared infrastructure and a common protocol, we are able to do things that would not be possible in the context of a standalone trial. So specifically, in this platform trial, we're able to test multiple drugs, as I just mentioned. We're going to be able to continue to add more as they become available. And importantly, we can share placebo data among different investigational products so that we can keep the number of people on placebo to small numbers while leveraging the infrastructure to still be able to test the drugs and see if they are effective for ALS. In addition to the placebo-controlled portion of the trial, which lasts 24 weeks or about 6 months, we also have an optional open label extension for people who complete the trial, and that's optional, but I can decide to go on open label extension, which means that after 6 months of placebo-controlled trial, if they complete the trial, they will have access to the active treatment long term. Again, and that's optional. Or people can choose to re-enter the trial and try a different investigational product and if they're still eligible. So that's the basic design of the trial. And if we can go to the next slide. I'm glad to provide enrollment updates. As of today, over 400 individuals with ALS have signed informed consent, and over 300 individuals were assigned to any of the regimens, meaning any of the investigational products, and exactly 323 were randomized within a regimen, which means that they were randomized to either active or placebo in one of the 4 regimens that are open at this time. And of those 323 individuals that were randomized within a regimen, 82 have already completed participation in the placebo-controlled trial and have opted into the open label extension. So I really want to thank all of the participants, all of their family members or friends who support them in their participation, because obviously the only reason we can test these drugs and really make progress towards developing new treatments is because of your participation. And in the past, we have been asked, to kind of break down enrollment by regimen. And I want to remind everyone that we launched the trial with regimens A, B, and C. So there will be 3 drugs. And that was in July 2020. And then we added the 4th regimen in January. So if you can click one more time, you can see that the first 3 regimens have roughly the same numbers in terms of enrollment. And the 4th regimen obviously has fewer people in it simply because it was started 6 months later. And you may notice the regimen A has just a few less individuals, and that's because there is a 2-week wait period for a necessary vaccination as part of participation in that regimen. So essentially the equal numbers of participants are assigned to any given regimen, and for regimen A, they just cannot be dosed for 2 weeks until after they have a vaccine. That's why the numbers are slightly lower there. Next slide. So this is a list of a link to our website where you can find information about the 52 sites that are currently actively enrolling, and you can also find contact information for all participating sites. I do want to mention that we will be adding more sites, but the ones that you have on the website right now are the current ones. And if you can go to the next slide, you can actually see the list of the 52 that are enrolling at this time. Next slide. For more updates, you can continue to come to these webinars. We will continue to update you on the enrollment numbers. This is really a suggestion that we received from our patient advisory committee, because we realize it's important for people to know exactly how the trial is doing, and to continue to learn more about the trial and other opportunities. We also have sort of side series in these webinars, and the first one that we had that we already did and recorded, and that's available on the website, is about the drug mechanism of action and the science behind each drug. We invited the scientists that are developing these drugs and representatives from the companies. So if you're interested in learning more about the mechanism of each drug, please refer to those recordings. We also have a number of other webinar opportunities because again, the idea is to really always be in conversation and be able to have a good discussion about different aspects of ALS research. So if you can go to the next slide. I would like to emphasize that we have some fantastic drug development webinars at NEALS, which is the clinical trial network that we work with. It's a great group of trial-ready sites that that do care for people with ALS in the clinic, but also do research. And different experts from NEALS have participated in these webinars, and they really go deep into the regulatory considerations, FDA considerations, and we have again a great list of webinars that you can see on the NILS website, and there's one more that will happen next week. Next slide. If you want to learn about other trials, in addition to the HEALEY ALS Platform Trial, we are so excited to have Dr. Cudkowicz present on the clinical trial pipeline series that will be in June, early June, and the recordings are also all available on the NILS website. And then next slide. Dr. Cudkowicz and I will present an update on the center trial that's coming up soon on May 17th. So please visit the website to register and attend the webinar. Next slide. So we are working on other webinar ideas. We are planning a series of webinars about biostatistics, and we will continue to introduce our sites. We had a few site PIs, site investigators that have joined us over the last 3 weeks, and I think it was a lot of fun. Really brought a lot of color, and really great to learn about the different characteristics of the different sites from different cities, different states. So we will continue to feature them as guest speakers. Last slide, I think if we can move, that's really the most important slide, which is really to introduce Catherine and Alison, our patient navigation team. They're always available to connect with you by phone or email. So feel free to send them emails, and we're always in contact throughout the week with your questions and to see how we can best support you and connect you with sites. And with that, I think I'll end the short presentation. And again, today, I'm so glad to be here with Alison, Catherine, and Dr. Cudkowicz to take your questions. I already see a question in the Q&A chat, so feel free to type your questions in the Q&A and we will take them. So the first question that came in is, when will you be accepting patients into the expanded access?
Thank you for that question. We hope that the first one will be enrolling in June, and that would be the verdiperstat or regimen B, and that would be at Northwestern, Mass General, and Duke. And we are working on expanded access with regimen C, that's a clean gold nanoparticles, and also regimen D with predopidine. Those will be later. I don't have the exact times, but we are working as fast as possible to get those going.
Yeah, so there is a very detailed question about sort of placebo sharing, and so I'm gonna read it, but also sort of, extract some themes. So, so the question is about sharing placebo, and the comment, which is a great one, is at some point we'll have a large placebo group fairly close together time-wise, and that's true. So the question is, assuming a trial with 4 arms completes after some time, you'll have a placebo group that totals 320. So and then reusing all of these, could a third round of 4 arms have more folks on active drug? I guess the question is, as we accumulate people on placebo and we can use and reuse the data, can we reduce the percentage of people on placebo even further. And then the other comment, which I really like, is that hopefully, all of this work will also lead to an effective cocktail of treatments. So perhaps, Dr. Sukovic, if you want to
Yeah,
comment on
sure.
those topics.
I think it's a great question. And yes, that is the goal of the platform trial, is to be able to continue to use the placebo the data from people on placebo for the 6 months for future regimens. And the only challenge will be is if the natural history changes. But at the moment, we're planning to keep using it for regimens E and F. And when the first 4 drugs finish, that's when we'll be able to look at the data and have a discussion with the FDA and with our statisticians about whether we can change the ratio for the future regimens. So we're going to be a whole lot smarter when we're done with the first 4 regimens, or even the first 3, to weigh in on whether we can change that ratio. It's already the best out there for all the trials, 3-to-1, but we realize that that's still 25% of people on placebo for 6 months, and we want to keep lowering in a way that we still can get an answer about whether a drug works or not. I agree completely with the idea that we're going to have multiple drugs and cocktails. I hope it'll actually be sooner than 5 or 6 years. We were just speaking at a conference yesterday about how ALS is becoming like the field of multiple sclerosis, where they have many, many treatment options for people. And I think we're getting there finally.
Yeah, great. There's a few questions that are coming in about expanded access. Questions about inclusion criteria. Are there inclusion criteria for the expanded access program, and will Canadians be able to participate?
Yeah, there are always some inclusion exclusion criteria, but for compassionate use or expanded access, they're based on safety. So there's no restrictions, for example, on how long someone's had the illness or what their breathing status is. But for example, let's say that for a regimen in, let's say the regimen A, where if someone had meningitis before, they can't get that drug. We would have those same type of inclusion exclusion criteria, but nothing related to your stage of illness.
Right. So there's another question about expanded access, and the specific question is whether the site USF Tampa will be participating. I guess in general, the question is, which sites will be participating in the platform, in the expanded access.
Yeah, right now, USF Tampa is not one of the expanded access. So I'll say that the way we decided which sites would start was twofold. One was, sites being interested. And so we have a list of sites that are interested. The other is sites that were enrolling well in the platform trial. We really wanted to go to the sites that were enrolling well, were having high quality data, and have the staffing to also be able to do an expanded access. And the third criteria actually was also geography. So in Florida, Holy Cross Hospital in Fort Lauderdale will be an expanded access site. Long term, we want to have all 52 or maybe 54 sites be expanded access, but we obviously starting with about eight or 9.
Great. There's a question about exclusionary medications. And so the comment is that, as a general rule, if a drug or supplement is being investigated as a treatment for ALS in another trial, you cannot be on it. So the question is specifically because curcumin and TUDCA, are commonly used, but they are tested in other trials. People
Okay, I can
cannot
read
be
the
on
rest of the
them
question. The
when
question
entering the
is
platform
whether
trial. So the question is there a list that you can post so that it's clear which ones are not allowed, so that it's clear which ones have to be stopped?
Yeah, really good question. So yes, and the general rule for every trial, not just the platform trial, is that if a drug is investigational, it can't also be given in that trial. So the ones you mentioned, the TUDCA and the Curcumin, are in other trials, so they're exclusionary. We do have a list. It obviously changes with time because there's new trials coming in. We can definitely go back to the ethics committee and get approval to post it. So that's a good idea. Thank you.
Yeah. So there's a question about the sort of re-entering the trial and ability to swallow. So the question is, I would like to participate in another regimen after I finish the one I'm currently in. However, I can no longer swallow pills safely, thus excluding me from reapplying. So I guess the question is this exclusion criterion going to change, or what are the options?
For these first four regimens, that inclusion criteria can't change. You're really not allowed to change the inclusion exclusion criteria mid-trial, because that changes the placebo group and then makes the ability to tell if your drug works or not invalid. But we are committed to, after the first four, kind of relooking at the inclusion criteria and seeing if there's any changes. So I think for your particular situation, that's where an expanded access or compassionate use program would be ideal. I also want to say about compassionate use that any doctor, any site can go to a company and advocate to do compassionate use for a drug. It doesn't have to be the HEALEY Platform Trial drugs. It could be other drugs. Now the company has to agree to it, but if there is a treatment out there that you and your physician think makes sense for you, they can go and approach the company directly also.
Yeah, and I know the person who asked the question, so let's definitely have a conversation about that. So there's a question. I just want to make sure I understand it correctly. So if it's about oral administration of edaravone, and the question is, it seems that oral administration of edaravone is not harmful, yet you know. So I guess the question is, for someone who cannot be enrolled in the oral edaravone study, can the EAP be accelerated?
That's a good question, but I don't know the answer, because I'd have to ask MT Pharma, which is the company that makes oral edaravone, what their plans are for an EAP. I know they're doing a phase 3 trial of oral edaravone, but I do not know if they have any EAP plans, but I'm very willing to ask them about that. I think that's a good question.
Yeah. So there's another question. Once being medically clear, when can you sign the consent form, and then how soon can you vaccinate it? I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I think this question's about regimen A. Regimen A, or zilucoplan, does require vaccination against a bacteria that can cause meningitis. So once somebody has signed consent, they can get vaccinated as soon as their site can arrange for that. So it could be the next day, for example, or a couple days later.
Great. So there's another question about subgroups. So the question about the fact that there's many scientists, such as Dr. Feldman from Michigan, that's doing research on sort of the different subgroups of people with ALS. For example, there's research looking at different groups that may benefit from different treatments. So the question is, I guess, in general, is it possible, for example, to do retrospective studies on riluzole and edaravone to identify the patients that responded well, and what was similar about those patients, and in general, moving forward, is this a good strategy, I guess, to test new treatments?
I think, a lot of people have a lot of ideas about why trials have failed in the past. And what no one ever mentions is that the drug might really not work. So I just want to point out that the most likely unfortunate cause for failed trials is the drug didn't work. But having said that, it is true that there could be treatments that work in some subsets of people and not in the others. And it's really important for us to always explore that, because the last thing we want to do is discard a drug that might work for some people. It's just very difficult in ALS to do that. We don't have the tools yet. And the tools being biomarkers or ways to pick out responders. But there's a lot of research in that. And I know a lot of you on the call have participated by giving blood samples or spinal fluid samples so that the field can develop those kind of responder type biomarkers. But I do think we have to just be cautious about saying that drugs failed because people are different, because there's no proof behind that statement.
Yeah. So more questions on EAPs. So the first general question is, how does a patient apply for expanded access?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So it would be at the site. So one thing about compassionate use studies is that it's still people on experimental medication. And so we do want to and need to follow people carefully. So you have to be able to go to that site and be seen by the doctors there. So each of the sites that are part of the expanded access will be able to offer that to their patients. So, and we realize that not everybody goes to those sites. And again, we're going to try to expand the expanded access program as fast as we can. But that's also why I wanted to point out that if, let's say, you get a care at a site or the HEALEY Expanded Access Program, that doesn't mean that you can't have a discussion with your physician about an expanded access option for you. And we, Sabrina and I, would be very happy, and we've offered this to Doctors in Neil's network to help them with that, and the process, and template that out so it's as easy as possible. And in fact, one of the grants that IMALS has given Dr. Paganoni and Dr. Bedlack is to do just that, is to educate physicians on how to do this for their patients and to template it out and make it easier for them.
Yeah. So there's also a question about whether Washington State is one of the 8 sites offering expanded access.
And no, it isn't right now. So I the ones, I'll just tell you what the ones they are, so that I don't mean to keep it secret, but we're starting, it'll be Mass General, Duke, Northwestern, Holy Cross, Barrows Neurological Institute, Hospital for Special Care, and California Pacific Medical Center. Those are the ones we're starting with. And again, those sites have all been fantastic in the platform trial. They're interested in doing EAPs. We will we want to expand to more sites, of course, and we have a long list of sites that want to do it. So hopefully that will happen as well.
And Texas Neurology as well, I think. Yeah.
Oh yes, sorry, 9 then. Okay, or maybe I counted wrong. Texas Neurology. Yeah.
There's a question about donations of spinal fluid or CSF. So the question is whether there's going to be donations of that during the open label.
A good question. I actually don't think we do. No, I'm looking at Sabrina. Thank you for bringing it up. I think we wanted to try to simplify the study in the open label for people, because we know we're asking a lot from people during the double blind, including donations of spinal fluid. Now, if someone's still interested in giving spinal fluid, I think there are standalone protocols and consent forms for that, and it's always enormously helpful. So if you are interested, please, you can reach out to Catherine Small. We can help find a site for that, or we can talk to the site investigator where you are.
Yeah, there's also a follow-up question to the oral Edaravon question, I guess, how to follow up on expanded access options with MT Pharma.
Yeah, I will try. I mean, I'll definitely reach out to them. I can't promise I'll get an answer, but but I can promise to ask them, and then I'm happy to report it next week. Obviously, your physician can also reach out to them, but I'm happy to make that first call.
Excellent. So I think these are the questions that we have received today. I don't know if there's any additional comments, Dr. Cudkowicz, or from Alison and Catherine.
So I had one that came in earlier this week that I just wanted to kind of answer more broadly. And somebody who was actually participating in the trial is in that phase where they're, transitioning from the placebo-controlled portion over into open label. And I know a lot of people have commented that it's a hard decision to make when you don't, because it's a blind trial, you can't know whether you're on placebo or not. So I think the person's question was along the lines of, is it possible to start the open label extension for the regimen that you're in, but then later decide if you're eligible for the master protocol still to be re-randomized into a different regimen even after starting open label?
That's a great question. I know, Sabrina, do you want to answer that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So, so definitely, I mean, if somebody starts an open label extension in a regimen, and then after some time in their participation decides that that's not a good fit, it's still possible to go back and restart from the beginning. Now, having said that, one still needs to be eligible. So I do want to be mindful of the original criteria that remain the same to enter the trial in the first place. But if somebody is eligible, yes, one could do one regimen, then some participation in the open label extension, and then sort of re-entering the trial from the beginning if still eligible.
I wanted to, while we're waiting for another question, just again thank those of you on the call who are in the trial, or those of you who are thinking about the trial, or sharing the word out with other people. The only way we're really going to find effective treatments is with this partnership. So I just wanted to echo my thanks. I know it hasn't been the easiest through the pandemic, but it is going really well, and enrollment's very well, and it's doing well, and that's really all because of you guys. So thank you.
Yeah, there's a statistical question. I think maybe we can take that before we end. And the question is whether we're familiar with Dr. Ruben van Eyck, and yes, I can tell you we work with him on many projects. But the question specifically is, about his recent presentation about looking at the different subdomains of the ALS-FRSR scale. So what his work suggests is that if a drug shows improvement in one domain, for example, respiratory function, and not much improvement in another domain, for example, fine motor skills. So one proposal from him was that the trial would not be viewed as a failure. And so again, the question is, I guess, to explore these and maybe discuss that with him. And the good news is that we're planning biostats webinars, but Merit, I'll let you answer or comment on this.
Yeah, first of all, I think he'd be a great speaker, so we'll definitely take you up on that suggestion. I do think it's possible that drugs might work on different parts of the illness, and we need to be looking at that. I also think we need to have a discussion with the regulatory agencies, because I think right now a drug might not be approved if it works on a subset of the score. But that doesn't mean we should accept that decision, but we need to have those discussions. And that kind of reminded me of a discussion I was having yesterday with a new foundation who wanted to know where the gaps were in the ALS field. And a gap, I'd say there are a fair number of gaps, so there's going to be fewer of them, but one of them is actually on outcome measures of how we decide if a drug is successful or not. We need more smart people like Ruben and Sabrina and Christina Fournier at Emory and others who are thinking about better ways to do this. And so hopefully I convinced that foundation to just fund some work like that, so we can get answers to that type of question.
That's great. Thank you. I think that was the last question that we had. I do want to thank people who sent other comments and suggestions. So thank you for that. The last comment was, that these type of webinars are helpful, even though we might not have all the answers, or perhaps we wish for a different answer. But I think that's why we're here to continue to work together. Thank you.
Thank you. See you next week.
Thank you. Bye.